And I would like to introduce, we have three speakers to introduce. I'd like to introduce firstly Miss Jane Cowell, and Jane has 17 years experience of leading, managing and advocating for libraries. She lives, breathes and promotes the impact of libraries to state government ministers, councillors, library professionals, really anyone who will listen. Currently working at the State Library of Queensland as Executive Director, Information and Engagement, Jane is leading Project Lucy. Is it Lucy? Yes? LUCI, that is. A collaboration with Solus UK, State Government of Victoria and the State Library of South Australia on the development of a technical solution to enhance personalisation of library services to members in the digital space. Along with Jane, we have Mr. Marcus Barber. Marcus is one of the most extensive, multi-industry experienced strategic futurist and value systems specialists in Australasia who works with organisations on innovation processes, strategy development and strategic planning. And Marcus is a visiting fellow at the Centre for Strategic Studies in Canberra with a client list that includes the FBI, Australian Department of Defence, Kimberley-Clark and Foster's. Marcus will be discussing Retail 4.0 and the future customer experience. And then we have Mr. Jeremy Story-Carter, who is a Walkley Award-winning reporter and digital content producer with ABC RN. And most recently, he worked as the digital production lead on the podcast Trace, as well as a producer on Bush Telegraph and host of the music series I'm Here Now. Jeremy now files across areas such as law, regional issues, arts and music for ABC RN, and he'll be discussing the change in how listeners access content now in the digital world and what this has meant for content producers of podcasts like Trace. Would you please welcome our speakers? Thank you.
Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to thank Jeremy and Marcus for joining me on the panel today. They've done it completely. I have known Marcus. I've only met Jeremy through Twitter. So we've actually combined this panel for you to discuss the ways that, the new ways that people are experiencing content and retail and what that means for libraries. So Jeremy, Trace was a digital first production for the ABC and it was a very deliberate move away from the traditional Radio National model of program production. Can you tell us about the reasons why RN did that and what the risks were that were involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose when we talk about digital first, we talk about not going out on the traditional linear radio. So immediately with the ABC, with Radio National, you're losing one of your greatest strengths, which is the ability for people just to turn on the radio and hear you. And there's still a huge and healthy audience who does that. So every set of ears and eyes, you've got to get to your program. So that's definitely a risk right from the start. For anyone who's not familiar with Trace, it's a true crime podcast set out in Thornbury. It's pretty hard going sometimes, some of the material, and so I suppose you might say one of the considerations around it is, well, when is a good time to broadcast on a radio station a show that's a pretty gruesome murder, very much real life story? Is it late at night? Is it early in the morning? And the reality is that by doing it as a podcast, people hear it when they want to, and that could be first thing in the morning. And you stand the chance of reaching a whole new audience, people who would never come to Radio National, who would never listen to, say, Philip Adams, but are interested in this sort of work. And it also, in the sort of work we were trying to do, it allows you to give just a little bit of an update. Like a linear radio audience, it's a very demanding beast. It's set by news blocks, hour blocks, and with a podcast, we can put in a 5-minute little update or a 10-minute update. If there's new stuff that comes right at the end, we can extend an episode beyond, say, half an hour if it deserves it, but if we don't have the material or we need to cut things, there's no reason it can't be 21 minutes and 22 seconds. And that's really about tailoring it to that exact platform. So I think I'd see that as one of the strengths, but as I say, you have to be the one to get people to that place in the first place, and that is definitely a risk.
So one of the key things that really struck me there was that you also trusted the audience to know when they wanted to actually have access to what was particularly gruesome. So, you really trusted the audience with the podcast. But you also mentioned, sort of that it's really difficult to get people to it because you're not looking at marketing, digitally. So how did you blend that traditional with the digital to successfully connect with your audiences and to get the new audiences that you did? Trace was a very successful program.
Yeah, thank you. It's all right. The first thing is obviously you've got to make something that you think holds up with ABC and RN's reputation. So it's not about abandoning that at all. And while people can be sort of cynical about podcasting and see it as a move away from what we do and what we've always done, the reality is this was a story that was anchored by long-form, hard investigation. And so there's a lot of hours put into it, perhaps more than we would ever be able to get away with doing with a normal show. So that's the first thing, is that the quality is still there. But in terms of getting people there, we hit every angle we could possibly do. And so when it went out, it wasn't just about, we could put it in the podcast feed, but no one would find it. You need to force people to get there. So I put Rachel Ford, who was the host, on local radio shows, tried to make it very local to a Melbourne community, but then I would put it on national shows, make it a national story. I created, Facebook videos that were specific to that platform, online articles, just TV news packages, and at every step making sure that those things were specific to that medium. So don't put up a half-hour video to Facebook when we know that people will only probably watch 30 seconds. So really tailoring it to those platforms. That was kind of pretty key to it. But there was a great discussion earlier about community, and I think we used to hope that we could create a community for people and they would just live within the ABC. But the reality is we had some people who, we had a great situation. I had someone write in where it was a group of old Italian mothers who grew up in Thornbury around the 80s, who all sat around the dinner table and would listen to it and then discuss, see if they could think of anything that came to mind and whether they could contribute to the case at all. But otherwise, other people would just listen to it discreetly, by themselves and wouldn't be sort of talking about it to anyone else. It really was up to how they wanted to enjoy it, and that was kind of making sure we were at those points where people wanted us was kind of key.
And I think that's a really good lesson for libraries, is that when we market, we don't market the same thing, sort of across everything. Yes, the content can go across all different platforms, but we need to be really cognizant of, sort of what works on those platforms and tailor it to that. The other key thing, question about community and discussion and, bringing people together around areas of interest, but really they come from different backgrounds. So some of it was that they were in Melbourne, and were discussing it and were here and wanted to know, well, did I see anything? Where was I when that happened? And bringing back those memories, but also people who were just interested in true crime and, bringing them to the audience. But what did you learn about the audience? Because being digital, you must have had really good data. What did you learn about their listening patterns, how they connected with you in the ABC, and, did the new audiences start using traditional services? Did you see any of that crossover?
Yeah, well, and I'm sure there's plenty of people who could relate to this sort of phenomena, but we're shamefully beholden to iTunes in a lot of this, and so iTunes is not very forthcoming with data, which is a drag. But what we do know is, Trace, we've had around 2.3 million downloads of Trace, which for something with just a few episodes is pretty solid. And the one of the interesting things is, the ABC we would love people to be using the ABC Listen app the same way libraries would want you to use their software, but I think it was about 1.5 million of those were people just using that podcast player on your phone, the one that comes on an Apple phone. And so we don't have, we have less control over the way people accessing that, and the way that looks, but that's where they're finding it. So that's great. They're still listening to the program. So that accounted for a large portion of our audience. 92%, I think, were on mobile, listen to Trace on mobile. So where you might think of an ABC audience as being, listening to it on a static radio or on the telly, this was very much mobile first. There was only about 150,000 downloading off a computer. So, yeah, other than that, I mean, the desperate thing once you have an audience, and particularly with Trace, I think we were successful in reaching people we don't normally reach, is trying to retain them. And I think we've got to get a lot better at that. But we have a few strategies around how we encourage people to stick around, how we encourage them to come back, say, to listen to our and other programs. But yeah, I think it's safe to say that it's created an appetite for more true crime podcasts, but also more ABC podcasts.
And it was interesting to me too that sort of there is this perception that audiences are not into long form reading, long form listening, long form viewing, but in actual fact, Trace would prove that wrong, because it was long form investigative journalism, very good journalism, that people came back for more, and they really were. So those podcasts, they did finish the series.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is one of the things we found, is that people did listen to it the whole way through. And like I said, it's not easygoing sort of stuff, but people were committed to it the same way people are committed to a 30-second news bulletin or an hour, history show. Don't be too cynical about your audiences. They will surprise you. They might access something one way on Facebook, and you might deduce all these sorts of meanings about modernity and the way people were accessing content that way. But then they'll go and spend a really long time with the same sorts of materials in a totally different way. Just context is everything.
And platform is everything.
And platform is there in the context of that platform, absolutely.
Thanks, Jeremy. And so I'd like to now hand over to Marcus and think about so we've just heard about how audiences are experiencing digital content in really different ways and how to reach them, sort of in different ways. But Marcus, how are people experiencing retail in different ways, and what, from your experience, sort of is actually driving that experience from a customer point of view?
Sure, I'll go through a couple of slides, but just to back up what's just been said, is that this content, this idea that people have 3-second attention spans and then click off is the biggest load of rubbish of all time. What you now have are people who have got their bullshit filters on, and so they identify the bullshit really quick, and so they click off. So from a library's point of view, get rid of the bullshit. Stop going with this whole headlines of, we've got to speak to a younger audience in 7-second bursts. It's the biggest load of rubbish of all time, because people will sit and engage with something that's relevant to them. What they have really got at now is filtering out the rubbish from the headlines really quickly. And so they click, 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 click. Oh, that looks good. Stick, 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 stick. Click, 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 click. Your job is to make it stick. So that's one of the issues. I'll go through a couple of slides here. And my issue with libraries is, at the moment, this is how libraries look to most people on the outside. You have the audience out here and the library over here, and the job is to try and drag the library and people and the users into the library. And this is, for me, where libraries are at. And what we want to try and do as libraries is get in, excuse me, can I just squeeze past it? Thank you. Is what you want to try and do, and some libraries are getting better at it, is sit in amongst the audience and see what they're actually looking and have them engage in it. Now, people call this rock art, and that is rubbish. These are the first libraries. These are the first educational tools. We put them up in a script to say, this is us as our family, this is our story, this is what you can hunt, this is what you can eat. These are the first indications of libraries. But what we've got excited about is these little things called books. And we think we're still stuck at this idea of books. And this is why some people don't want to fund libraries. Because you lot control the world. And we can't let you control the world, because you're going to educate people and teach them to think for themselves and give them these new radical ideas about how society works. And so we won't fund you. In fact, we'll do everything we can to make you think the purpose of a library is to have boxes of things that just store paper. and we fight you on your marketing and your desires to upgrade and your technology and your outreach to consumers because we don't want you to control the world. And so what do we do through the ages? Well, we have Latin, and we don't teach people how to understand or read Latin. And then we have printing presses, but we can't let anyone have printing presses because they're for the devil. So we can't use those as well, but then we'll finally print the book that allows people to use printing presses. This is the process. So librarians, you control the world. Back yourselves in. From a retail sector, this is the challenge. That yellow library pointing to a dot is the Phoenix Park Library up there in East Malvern and the megalith that is Chadstone Shopping Centre. And both entities want data. Both entities want consumers, but how they go about doing it and how they manipulate the consumer is very different. Here's the future of retail at a customer section. This is the push model that is available to you right now. Who's got a mobile phone? Can I just check? Cool. Who's got data tracking on their mobile phone engaged as we speak? Okay, so I know within about 3.5 feet where to send the missile. And it can be a retail missile. And here's the future of retail. This is what retailers want to do as you walk through the megalith of shopping centres, is that you'll have your Bluetooth or GPS activated. Because they've got data on you through all your online searches, they know what you search on, things you've bought, when you've bought them, what your interests are. They customise an ad. As you are walking through the shopping centre, one of these little advertising screens pops up and says, hey, want to buy some donuts? And you go, I love donuts. I wonder how they knew that. And donut, donut, donut. The roboticism of humanity. This is what's happening. This is what's available right now and what retailers are really excited about. This is the push model of the future of retail. But the pull model that's emerging from a consumer point of view is this. What we're seeing is what we're known as what I'm calling a vapor currency, where we engage in content in a way that we choose, at a time we choose, and give over a transaction in the method we want. And they have this vapor currency idea that's crowdsourcing, that does 3D manufacturing, that we can buy from anyone, anywhere, anytime, and I don't need to go to a retail store. But to do that, you need defence mechanisms. Turn off your GPS data, never tag anyone of your friends on a social media platform, but if you are on social media platforms, click on every single ad that pops up, whether you are interested or not. Because what you want to do is hide in plain sight. And the only way you can do that from a retail point of view, if you are defending yourself as a consumer, is click on everything so the profile doesn't have a clue who you are. Because if you just keep clicking on cat videos and fish videos, guess what's coming down the pipeline at you? And the retail will get you. So be careful of that. So here's some of the emerging implications for libraries. We're talking about the idea of identity recovery. From a consumer point of view, how do you know who the user is? We heard in the previous panel, Canadian libraries didn't actually hold the copy of How to Build a Bomb. It doesn't matter because they've already accessed that data somewhere else. So now they're just looking for other means to add to their understanding of how to build a bomb. The rise of enoughness. This is happening in Scandinavia where people are going anti-purchasing or anti-upgrades. The car I've got's enough. The phone I've got's enough. The clothes I've got's enough. The spouse I have's enough. And so this rise of enoughness we're seeing push back on the concept of consumption at all costs. And they're for libraries, the mastemisation of your content. The ability for people to access what they want in the way they want it, anytime they need to, and how they need to. That's the biggest step up libraries need to be able to make. It's putting the library out to the user in a way that they want to engage. And I think libraries really need to start looking at the concept of crowdsourcing or co-creating information you held. Have your people that walk through the doors write a chapter of a new book, or 2 lines, or 3 words. And so for the next 2 weeks, we're going to write a book together. Read the book so far, add your input. Read the next level, add your input. Chapter, 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 chapter. Layer it with social, and this is about building community and usage inside the library sector.
Thank you, Marcus. So, raised quite a lot of thinking, but from my point of view, and from the library point of view, answering some of those questions raised, I really think that we need to look at our policies and our processes, looking at the value pyramid of experiences. So thinking about, is it functional, is it emotional, is it life-changing, and what's the social impact, and really reviewing everything that we do. We do have quite a lot of redundant, inefficient library operations. We often say, oh, that would be lovely, but that's against the rules. And how to achieve scale, we need to partner and open up our institutions and not be siloed ourselves. And with the State Library of Queensland, we've actually partnered with the State Government of Victoria, the State Library of South Australia, and the Scottish Government, and a UK, Solus UK company, to actually look at developing a discovery layer that suits us, that has open API, that is personal, that does do machine learning, that connects you around your interests, not necessarily to people like you, because you might like beer, but there's a lot of people with different backgrounds from you that like beer as well, so it connects you socially. So that's what we're doing, and we're putting our money where our values are and actually doing that. Now, I've run out of time, and Steve's been waving at me for some time, and we've got just enough time for a couple of questions if people have some questions for us.
So before we do questions, could you thank our panel? Round of applause. And hands up for questions. Who wants to start? Come on, there's lots of provocative ideas there. I'm sure somebody wants to jump in. Otherwise, I can ask one again. Okay, I guess it's me. Being that I work for a university library, I noticed that we're talking a lot about public libraries and sort of personalising content. Can you maybe just very briefly reflect on how that might work in a university context?
I think in a university context, it's about connecting the library use and personal use to the learning that the student is doing. So really personalising not only where they're at, so that you know that a student's missed the tutorial, so you can actually intervene a little bit early if you think they're struggling, but also about how to connect socially, their next step. I think universities do not do well at helping students go the next step of employment. Is it entrepreneurship? Do I have an idea? Libraries can play a real personalised view of connecting people around a like idea. So I'm from the business school, I'm a software developer, and I'm a creative, designer. Gee, if those three schools got together and those three students got together, what could they create? I think libraries can personalise that interest, really well, and look at that personalised journey. So look at from the student's point of view, not the library's point of view. And the same as the public library, look at it from the consumer point of view, not the library point of view. We tend to put our views forward. And I noticed the other panel, we have diverse communities. There wasn't a lot of diversity in that panel, and there's not a lot of diversity in our library staff. So we need to actually bring participation in and bring choices and participatory decision-making practices into libraries. And we need to trust that our users can make a good decision and we don't have to make that decision for them. So that's driving that personalisation. And I think bringing the students in to make decisions about how we do information literacy, what's important to them, how it connects to them, would make a very different experience for students. And I think university libraries are definitely doing that, but we're at the beginning of that.
Question from the floor?
Right down the back. I just want point of definition. Personalisation and democratisation are two very, very, very different things, okay? So personalising information services is not the same as giving, for example, the crowd the opportunity to participate in decision making. If we were to truly do that, you would give up your budget and hand it over to people to curate your collections, all right? Let the crowd make the decisions about what resources are acquired by libraries and how they're distributed. And I'm not sure the library sector is ready for that yet.
Helsinki's doing it now, and so is Aarhus in Denmark.
Yeah, and there's many other examples where crowdsourcing is used very creatively. I'll talk on Thursday about what happens when you actually crowdsource the conceptual foundations of the library, right? So we stop using ontologies that privilege one community above all others. When we talk about diversity, it's not just about the objects, it's what Mike Jones was talking about in the session prior to this one, it's about the relationships as well. So if personalisation and democratisation are really different, then we can use the crowd more creatively to think about how we deal with information overload if that's the problem we want to solve. We can ask in university library scenarios for students to upvote resources that they find helpful or useful so that students coming up behind them can use the same assets productively. We tend not to do that even though the technology already exists. Okay, we still believe we have the expertise as the expert community and that the communities that we work with don't have that expertise. If you want to really democratise the library, you have to give something up.
Agree totally.
Yeah. And on that too, the issue here is that libraries have to address, particularly university libraries, who they allow access to for what reasons and how they expend their budgets. And we still have a publishing model in the university sector where universities pay hundreds of thousands of dollars a year access to journals that are then denied access and put behind a paywall from the very people inside the universities who created that content. So we have to address that when we talk about democratisation of information. At what point does a library or the university proper address the issue of how we enable access to content we've created ourselves? And I don't think we're ready for that conversation yet either.
Well, we're definitely not, because it's not like anyone will disagree with you, except no one will actually build the infrastructure that those companies have built, okay? And that's the critical problem. No one has stepped up to say, we'll do it. We'll build that infrastructure. And blockchain, might be the answer to that.
Well, Jan and I were having a conversation about blockchain previously. If you blockchain a digital copy, then you can pass it on to someone else like a typical coin and no one else can open it until it comes back. So it's a way to treat a digital item in much the same way as a hard copy at the moment.
Other questions from the floor? Any hands? Oh, I can see one down here. And again, if you could just state your name and organisation when you ask your question, thanks.
Hi, my name's Ruth and I'm from the University of Melbourne. My question is, I'm a liaison librarian in the creative arts faculty, so the idea of an algorithm deciding where someone's practice goes is possibly the worst idea ever. If you are hoping to encourage artists to create exceptional works, how can an algorithm be part of that?
I think we heard, is this Lucy that you're asking the question about, the discovery layer or just the algorithms themselves?
I guess you were suggesting that, you know, when libraries are involved, you know, they can tell if someone hasn't gone to a tutorial or what they might need next. I think in some situations that's not necessarily going to support the kind of knowledge they need to find at university. Again, I'm sure there are many more experienced academic librarians who could talk about that, but certainly there's a lot of pilot programs around the personalised learning journey, around, you know, sort of mapping and making sure that from a learner's point of view, that they're in the best place possible, and also about that browsability. And it is a bit about the information overload, the curation that can come from the machine learning. No, it's not just about machine learning. We learned that this morning, that, you know, sort of the cognitive layer of the library and the library staff is still, you know, sort of very important, but, you know, sort of a lot of machine learning can do that. And I think, you know, sort of it is growing in terms of things like Spotify. You know, there is an expectation from a consumer point of view that some base level curation, you know, sort of can be done around my likes. And I think libraries need to recognise that and start bringing that to the fore.
We will have to wrap up. Could you once again thank our panel, Ms. Jane Cowell, Mr. Marcus Barber and Mr. Jeremy Story-Carter.